Matthew leaned across the conference table, his voice lowered, though everyone else in the room had already stopped speaking. You weren't in that meeting, none of us. We're supposed to be, but somehow. You can still feel the silence that spread through the air, the way a single question can freeze time. No one remembers what he whispered, except for the woman standing by the door. The woman no one had invited. The one they thought was only there to refill the water pitchers. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, and when the managers demanded to know who she was, she only smiled, the kind of smile that makes the bottom of your stomach drop before she spoke 7 words that no one will repeat aloud. By the end of the day, 2 people had cleared out their desks without explanation. One man swore he saw her name written on the deed of the entire building, and the cameras inside that conference room stopped recording halfway through. The blinking red light claimed otherwise. You're here now, seeing this. Because the question that began there, the one no one dared to put into words, has slipped through, and for some reason it has chosen you. What if the person you dismissed, the one you ignored because they weren't on the schedule or on the list, was never meant to be introduced at all? What if she had been there longer than the company itself? Not as an employee, but as something the paper trails could never quite explain. You feel it, don't you? That quiet shiver between your shoulder blades, the certainty that this isn't a story about business or money or a boardroom at all. It's about ownership in the deepest sense, the kind that doesn't come with contracts, but with silence, with memory, with something older than the walls you sit between now. Before anyone could process what had happened, she reached down, touched the edge of the polished mahogany table, and spoke a name one. None of them recognized, one that does not appear anywhere in the company's files. A name you know, a name you shouldn't. And when the room exhaled again, one of the senior partners was simply gone, his chair sliding slowly back, as though he had only stepped away for a moment. But he never returned. Tell me, if the owner was never listed, never voted in, never announced, then who exactly have they been working for all these years? And why, when you read this, does it feel like she's already standing behind you? The chair never stopped moving. That's the detail no one could explain, not even later when the story was passed around in half-jokes, in whispers thick with alcohol and denial. It slid back across the carpet as though guided by a hand none of them could see. Slow enough to be deliberate, gentle enough to make every hair rise on the back of their necks. The partner who had been sitting there, Daniel Cole, 47, married, father of 2, was simply absent. No sound of shoes against the floor, no shadow brushing the glass walls of the conference room. Just gone. But here's the part that unsettles me most, and maybe you'll understand why. No one said his name. Not once. Not in that instant. Not in the panicked calls that followed. Not even in the emails, scrubbed clean by legal. They all kept talking around it, as though the absence itself had rewritten their language. I had to look through old company rosters just to be sure he'd even real at all. And when I found his picture, when I stared at his face on a faded company retreat photo, I swear to God I felt like I was looking at a stranger I used to know in another life. The woman, the one who wasn't invited, stood by the door, as though nothing had happened. I remember her fingers still resting on the table's edge, nails short, skin pale with the faintest trace of veins, and that name she had spoken, still echoing like static caught between frequencies. I wrote it down once, on the back of a receipt. The ink bled, the paper tore, and when I checked again, the word had vanished as though I'd only imagined it. My phone buzzed that nighttime audio notification of a voice memo I don't remember recording. When I pressed play, it was just breathing. My breathing. Then, faint beneath it, another voice whispering, "She owns you already. You don't understand how quickly doubt grows in silence. How a missing man becomes a missing thought, then a missing memory." I told myself maybe I was tired, maybe this was stress. But then the glitches started. My voicemail replayed the wrong messages. Emails I swear I drafted were blank when I opened them again. One night, while replaying that same recording, I heard something new layered under the static, a laugh. Distant but warm. The kind of laugh you'd know instantly, even if you hadn't heard it in years. It was my mother's laugh. Except she's been dead since 2009. That's when Henry appeared. Or reappeared, I still don't know which is true. He called himself a colleague, claimed we'd worked together years back, though no record of him exists in any HR file I checked. He knew details, though details no stranger could possibly know. My coffee order. The scar on my wrist from the summer I fell through a screen door. He even remembered the song my father played every Saturday morning, the one I'd tried to forget because it always came right before the fights. But here's the problem! Henry never said those things directly. He let them slip like accidents, little landmines in the middle of casual conversation. Still taking it black with too much sugar, he'd ask. Or, bet that scar still itches when it rains. I never told him any of it. I never told anyone. He claimed to be investigating too. Claimed he saw what I saw in that conference room. That the woman had been there before, in other places, under other names. He said her presence was part of a pattern, a string of vanishings buried under corporate settlements and sealed court records. He wanted me to believe him. And for a while, I didn't till I noticed he never used Daniel's name either. Not once! Always the partner. Always the one who disappeared. Do you understand the weight of that? When someone insists on confirming your nightmare, but never speaks the exact truth you're dying to hear. It corrodes the edges of reality. It makes you doubt whether you saw anything at all. The worst part wasn't Henry, though. The worst part came 3 nights later when I woke to find my television turned on by itself. Snowy static hummed across the screen, the same whispering tone I'd heard on my voicemail. And then, just for a moment, the static cleared not into an image, but into words scrawled across the glass in sharp, jagged letters. You missed the meeting? My reflection stared back at me through those words, but I couldn't move. The sound burrowed into my skull like a drill. By the time I blinked, the screen was black again. I tried telling myself it was a dream, a sleep paralysis hallucination, but my throat was raw the next morning, as if I'd been screaming. And Henry, he called me at 6:17 a.m., his voice flat, already knowing. She's not after them anymore, he said. She's after you. I wanted to hang up, to block his number, but my hand wouldn't move. I listened as he told me something I haven't repeated out loud since. That the real unsolved mystery isn't who she is or where she came from, it's why she chooses the rooms she does, the meetings she wasn't invited to, the places where someone was already beginning to doubt themselves. He said she doesn't appear to strangers, only to those who've already lost a piece of memory they can't get back. I asked him, finally, about the name she spoke in the conference room. The one no one wrote down. The one that vanished from the paper in my pocket. I needed to know if he heard it too. And Henry, he only laughed. The same warm laugh I heard in my voicemail. The one that didn't belong to him. The one that belonged to my dead mother. That's when I realized Henry wasn't there to help me. He wasn't even there to warn me. He was proof of something worse, proof that the truth behind what no one tells you doesn't come from outside. It comes from the cracks in your own memory. From the voices you swore you buried, from the fragments of yourself you can't trust anymore. But the file is still there. I don't know how you found it, how you're seeing this, but if you listen closely, if you rewind the audio enough times, you'll hear it too. Not her voice. Not Henry's. Yours. Whispering a name you don't remember speaking. And when you hear it, you'll understand why the cameras never stopped recording that day. Why the footage isn't missing it, just waiting for you to press play. Do you want me to? 4 weeks after Henry's voice bled into my mother's laugh, I convinced myself that the only way out was through the documents, through the archive. Files through whatever scraps of history the company still held locked behind passwords and clearance levels. The fear had become unbearable, yes. But there was also something worse. The constant suggestion that I had imagined all of it, that maybe there had never been a missing man, never been a woman by the conference door, never been a name scratched in static across my TV. So when I finally stumbled upon a hidden directory buried 3 levels down in the company S server on, unlabeled folder filled with recordings and let myself believe this was it. The hidden truth behind everything. I thought I had found the key that would either confirm my sanity or shatter it. The files were grainy, half-corrupted, timestamps jumping erratically like memory glitches caught on tape. Most of them showed conference rooms, different cities, different years. Yet each recording carried the same uneasy architecture. Executives sitting stiff in chairs. The faint hum of a projector, then silenced where voices should have been. In one clip from 2004, I watched as a man in a Navy suit stood to speak, though his mouth moved. Not a single sound came through the speakers. Every other person in the room sat frozen, watching him, their eyes wide with the same brittle terror I remembered from my own meeting. When I leaned closer, I noticed something stranger still. In the corner of the room, blurred almost into invisibility, a woman stood with her hand resting on the table. The same posture, the same stillness, the same absence of invitation. I told myself this was proof. I wasn't losing my mind. She was real. She had been here before. Henry was right about the pattern. Each folder contained names, lists of attendees, sign-in sheets, but the names shifted each time I refreshed the page, as though reality itself couldn't decide who had been present. My own name even appeared once on a meeting from 2011, though I had no memory of ever working here that far back. For a moment, my chest filled with relief, almost joy. It wasn't me. It was never me! I wasn't crazy, they lied to me. The mystery uncovered itself like a wound finally draining, and I thought if I pulled just a little harder, I'd reach the core. That was when I saw the transcript. Just one, marked differently from the others. Instead of silence, it contained words typed out in shaky formatting, uneven spacing, as though someone's hand trembled while entering them. The text described a meeting in 1987, long before I was even born. But the description, the sliding chair, the missing partner, the refusal to say his name, it was identical to mine. Identical, down to the exact phrasing of the minutes. And buried in the middle of the page was a sentence that made my entire body go cold. The woman was already known to one participant. He recognized her, though he would not admit from where. That recognition burrowed into me like a splinter, because deep down, I knew the same thing. I had seen her before, not just in that conference room. Somewhere else, long ago. The memory sat just out of reach, like a word on the tip of the tongue. I ransacked my past for it, clawing through old photo albums, yearbooks, school rosters. Nothing! Until one night, in a box buried in my attic, I found a VHS tape labeled in my father's handwriting. Birthday, 1995. The video played in washed-out colors, shaky with the movements of a camcorder long since dead. Children screamed in the background, cake smeared across faces, cheap balloons sagging against the ceiling. I was there, small and oblivious, 4 years old. My parents laughed off camera, their voices impossibly young. Then, as the tape panned across the room, a woman stood by the back door, still, watching. Her hand rested against the kitchen counter the same way she had touched the conference table. She wasn't family. She wasn't a neighbor. No one addressed her. But there she was. I hit pause and leaned closer, heart hammering. The years hadn't blurred her. Same hair, same eyes, same expressionless, calm. She had been at my 4th birthday party. And here's where the false resolution set its teeth into me. I told myself I had solved it, that she wasn't supernatural at all, but some shadowy figure tied to my family, maybe a stalker, maybe a debt collector, someone who had followed us across decades. If she was flesh and blood, then maybe everything else, the static, the vanishing. Henry's laugh was my trauma painting over reality. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night, convinced I had found an anchor, convinced that if I tracked her history, I'd bury this nightmare once and for all. But the tape didn't end there! Just before the footage cut to black, the camera shook as if someone had grabbed it. My father's voice, slurred and angry, cursed at the person holding it. The frame spun, blurred across the living room carpet. And in those seconds of chaos, before the power button clicked, I heard something unmistakable. A whisper, too close to the microphone, layered over the static of the tape itself. A woman's voice saying, "You missed the meeting." I dropped the remote. My hands shook so badly I thought I would snap the plastic in two. This wasn't trauma. This wasn't imagination. She had been there long before the company, long before the conference room, long before Henry. This wasn't about them. It was about me! The hidden truth I thought I'd uncovered collapsed in an instant. The files weren't evidence, they were beta. The video wasn't coincidence, said was a reminder. And the woman wasn't just appearing at meetings. She had always been appearing in places where memory could fracture, where silence could bury the unexplainable, where no one would risk saying her name. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. Because suddenly I remembered something else, something worse. A summer afternoon, maybe 1999, sitting on the porch with my mother, she had leaned close, her voice hushed, warning me never to speak to the woman if I saw her, never to acknowledge her presence, because acknowledging her was how she chose you. I had buried that memory for decades, forgotten it entirely. And the fact that I had forgotten it at all, that was proof she had already been here, watching, guiding the erasure herself. The air in the attic pressed heavy against me as I realized the danger wasn't the meetings, or the vanishings, or even Henry's hollow laugh. The danger was remembering too much, uncovering the thread she had let me tug on. Because maybe the only thing worse than not knowing the truth is knowing it too clearly. I thought about burning the tape, destroying the files, but I couldn't move. And then, as though the house itself breathed with me, a sound cut through the silence. The television downstairs flickering to life on its own. I stumbled down, chest tight, and there it was, again static filling the screen. But this time, it wasn't words written across the glass. It was a face. My face. Years younger. My lips moving silently, eyes wide as though I was speaking directly to myself now. I pressed mute, desperate, but the image kept moving, and even with no sound, I knew what I was saying. The same phrase from the VHS. The same phrase that had followed me all this time. You missed the meeting? And then, just before the screen cut to black, I saw something else behind me in that recording. A shape at the doorway, her hand resting on the frame, her eyes fixed, not on the boy in the video, but on me watching it. Do you see now why none of this fits neatly? Why every resolution phrase at the edges? Because the mystery isn't what happened in that room, or why Daniel Cole vanished, or who Henry really is. The mystery is why, every time you replay the story, the details shift just slightly. Like memory, trying to warn you of something you once knew but can't bear to admit. And the twist the pot you'll have to live with is this: you've seen it before too. You just don't remember where. Not yet. But you will. Would you like me to keep unraveling? Or do you want to stop here before she realizes you're listening? I used to think the story was mine alone, that the static and the whispers and the vanishing faces were stitched into my private undoing. But that was before the messages started appearing in places I hadn't touched, in words I hadn't written, in handwriting that wasn't mine, but still knew me with the kind of intimacy that makes you sick. The first was carved into the condensation on my bathroom mirror one morning. Asterisk, you were right all along. I stood there, towels still clinging to my shoulders, heartbeat uneven, trying to convince myself it was just steam playing tricks. But the letters were too precise to patient, as if someone had taken their time while I slept. It didn't stop there. A note slipped into my mailbox without a stamp. A chalk mark drawn on the sidewalk outside my apartment. A spiral looping into itself over and over. The same shape I had seen scratched in the margins of those corrupted transcripts. At first I thought this was the woman's doing, that she was tightening a grip on me, but then a second thought broke through. What if these were warnings, not threats? What if someone else was here with me, living through the same unbearable fracture, reaching out the only way they knew how? That possibility became undeniable when I dreamed of a face I'd never met but recognized instantly. The way you recognize someone you once sat beside in a classroom you've forgotten never attending? He stood in a dim office, stacks of paper behind him, tie undone, his voice steady as he whispered, Asterisk, they're not memories, they're instructions. I woke drenched in sweat, the phrase still echoing, and when I reached for my phone, I saw a draft email open on the screen. Blank, except for 3 words typed into the subject line. Found footage 2001. I swear I never wrote it. 4 days. The dream returned. His words unchanged, but the room shifting, sometimes fluorescent lights, sometimes candle glow. Once, even the gray wash of a basement stairwell I'd swear I had been in as a child. He never gave his name, never explained why he was speaking to me, only repeated the same phrase like a mantra until I started to believe it. Not memories, instructions. And then I began to see the pattern. Every glitch, every whisper, every disappearance, they weren't accidents or hallucinations. They were cues. Signals embedded in the fabric of our days, guiding us towards something. And I wasn't the only one seeing them. In the weeks that followed, I found proof. A message on a public bathroom stall in Chicago that read, asterisk, she stood by the door too. A graffiti tag in San Diego. The same spiral symbol with the words, asterisk, not invited. Still there. Even a forum buried deep online where strangers spoke in riddles, circling the same story without ever naming her, afraid that speaking too clearly would invite her back into the room. That was when I realized others had been watching me. Not just her, not just Henry, not just my own memories folding in on themselves. There were people following this story, people who had lived their own version of it. People who knew the same sick dread of recognition when a photograph or a recording showed someone who shouldn't be there but was. And if you're still here, if you've been listening this long, then maybe you've felt it to the pulse of something inside your own past, that docent T belonged to you. The glitch that tells you your story has been touched by hands you never invited. The secret communication grew bolder. I started finding envelopes under my door, each containing a single Polaroid photo. Washed out, but sharp in one detail. Always a meeting, always a table, always a figure standing at the edge. Different years, different states, but the same posture, the same hand resting on wood or glass, as though claiming it. On the back of one, scrawled in faint ink, the words, asterisk, what the government never released. I turned it over again and again, studying the blurred faces. And I knew then, this wasn't just corporate, wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Someone had buried this, controlled the narrative, scrubbed the records, so that each of us would think we were alone. And yet, threaded through all of it, came the third voice. Not the woman, not Henry, not the nameless dreamer, but someone watching me watch myself. Their words never appeared in physical form, never arrived as recordings or whispers, but as sudden intrusions in my own thought stream, sentences I knew weren't mine. Asterisk, stop chasing the origin. It's not where it started. Asterisk, the memory isn't broken. You are... Asterisk, you don't know what you promised. They called themselves the Observer, though I never saw them, never felt their presence the way I felt hers. They existed only as disruption. A hand scribbling across the page of my mind. When I tried to form clear lines. And unlike Henry, unlike the others, the Observer didn't try to convince me of anything. They only cut at the story, tearing holes where I thought I'd found resolution. The heaviest blow came when the Observer forced me to remember a night ID long since erased. December 2001. After my uncle's funeral, the family gathered in a rented hall. I remembered the smell of ham, the flat drone of relatives talking, the numbness of grief. But then the memory glitched, flickered, and I saw her, standing at the edge of the hall, hand pressed against the wall, watching as though waiting for me to notice. And I had noticed, even then, even at 10 years old. I had walked toward her before my mother yanked me back, whispering harshly in my ear, "Don't you dare, don't you dare." I had forgotten that moment completely. Forgotten because I was meant to. The Observer didn't let me hide anymore. You've always known. The thought pressed against me, suffocating. Asterisk, that's why she comes back. That's why you never escape. It's no longer just about her. It's about the fact that our identities, our memories, the very scaffolding of who we are, have been compromised. Not stolen, not erased, but rewritten again and again. Until we mistake instructions for memories, until we mistake surveillance for family photographs, until we mistake ownership for invitation. And the others, the ones who leave spirals, the ones who slip notes and carve warnings know this too. They've been trying to tell us, in ways only we who are marked can decode. I know you've felt it. The déjà vu that bends too sharp. The found footage from 20 years ago that shows a detail you can't explain. The moment when a stranger's face seems like one you've seen before. Even though you haven tea? That's not coincidence. That's not paranoia. That's the thread tightening. That's the part they never wanted you to see. And if you think you're safe because you're only watching, only listening, only following this story, then you've already missed a turn. Because the others are watching you too. You'll see it soon. In the way your reflection lingers too long. In the sound of your own voice played back on a device you don't remember touching. In the note you'll find one morning where there shouldn't be one, telling you what you already fear. You were right all along. I can't tell you how this ends because I don't think it does. I can only tell you that the observer is still here, listening with me, waiting for me to slip and speak the name we've both avoided. They know I'm close. Too close. And that's why everything feels charged now. Electric, heavy, with a danger I can't define. And when the screen goes black, when the audio cuts, when you sit there alone in silence, ask yourself one last question. If this story was never mine to begin with, whose has it always been? I need to tell you something that I've avoided, something I've hidden even from myself, because it feels like speaking it aloud makes it permanent, makes it real, in a way I can never take back. All this time, I believed the mystery was external, her hand on the table. The missing partner, the spirals left, like breadcrumbs in places I'd never walked. I thought I was piecing together a puzzle left by forces larger than me, faceless and cruel. But the longer I've stared into the static, the more I've replayed the footage, the more I've listened to voices that shouldn't exist, the more I've come to understand a truth I wish I hadn't. This was never about what happened. It was about why. And the why lives inside of me. Every memory I've recovered feels like it was waiting for me to notice it, like someone hid shards of glass in the folds of my mind and dared me to keep running my hands through the fabric until I bled enough to see clearly. The missing people, the voices on old recordings, the spirals on sidewalks, they're real, but they aren't random. They're mirrors. Mirrors forcing me to look at the fractures in my own life, fractures I've ignored because they hurt too much to name. The woman? Her presence in every room, every recording, every childhood photo has always been the question I wasn't willing to ask. What part of myself did I buried so deeply that it grew into a shadow large enough to stand outside the door of every meeting I've ever entered? What wound was so unbearable that my mind gave it a body, a face, a permanence? I think back to my mother's warning, the night she told me not to speak to her, not to acknowledge her. I remember the desperation in her voice, the trembling that didn't sound like fear of a ghost, but like fear of me recognizing something I wasn't old enough to understand. And now I wonder if my mother knew the truth, that some silences are inherited. That trauma is passed not just through blood, but through what we choose not to say. Maybe the woman isn't a stranger at all. Maybe she's the accumulation of everything my family never admitted. Every secret that swallowed us whole. Every meeting where someone was present but never named. And if that's true, then she isn't just haunting me. She is me, or at least the part of me I've denied my grief, my guilt, my hunger for answers in places that were never safe to look. I don't know what terrifies me more. The possibility that she's real, or the possibility that she isn't. Henry's laugh, my mother's voice. The observer's interruptions, what? If they weren't warnings, but invitations. What if all of it was pushing me toward this moment, where I have to decide whether to keep running from the shadow or to accept it as my own reflection? And what if accepting it means I vanish the way Daniel Cole did, slipping out of the room, out of memory, out of language altogether? There's a weight pressing on my chest as I say this, because I know I can't go back. I can't unsee the footage of my childhood birthday, can't unhear the words whispered into my voicemail, can't erase the spiral burned into my vision every time I close my eyes. I am trapped in the realization that the only way to survive is to choose whether to believe the story was mine all along. So here is my confession. I've lied to you. Not out of malice, not to manipulate, but because I couldn't bear to admit the simplest, most devastating truth. I didn't miss the meeting. I was never meant to be a guest. I was always the owner. And ownership is a kind of prison. Ownership means responsibility for what has been erased. For what has been whispered in the dark, for the silences that became bodies standing at the edge of rooms. Ownership means that if I accept her as me, I have to carry every unsolved mystery, every hidden truth, every memory glitch, not just as stories, but as proof of what I allowed to remain unspoken. I don't know if I want that weight. I don't know if I can survive it, but I do know this. The reason you're still here, still watching, still listening, is because some part of you recognizes it too. The way you wake at 3 a.m. with a voice in your head that dose and tea belong to you. The way you've seen faces in photographs that shouldn't be there. The way you've carried secrets your whole life without knowing who gave them to you. That isn't coincidence. That's the echo of ownership moving through all of us. And now comes the choice, the one I can't make for you. You can keep pretending this is a story you stumbled across online, something distant and abstract, or you can admit that it feels familiar, because it is. You can let it slip into the background, dismiss it as fiction, or you can sit with the unbearable truth that you've been in the room before. You've seen her hand on the table, and you've tried to forget it just like I did. But forgetting doesn't save you. It only delays the awakening. So here I stand, at the edge of an answer that feels more like a collapse. If I speak her name, if I claim her as mine, then maybe I'll finally dissolve into the silence where all the others have gone. If I refuse, if I keep denying, then I LL. Spend the rest of my life haunted by a shadow that knows me better than I know myself. Either way, I'm undone. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the truth isn't meant to set us free. Maybe it's meant to break us open, to force us to see the fault lines we've carried all along, to reveal that we were never in control, only pretending we were. Maybe being human means living inside stories we'll never fully understand, carrying ghosts that are less supernatural than they are emotional, and learning to exist with the terror that some mysteries Dante want to be solved because the answer is us. The static hums again as I speak this, as though the signal is bleeding through to remind me that none of this belongs neatly on a screen, that all of this has always been inside. My reflection trembles in the glass, her eyes watching me from just beyond, waiting for me to finally accept her. And I think I understand now, not the how, not the what, but the why. Because in the end, the real horror isn't that she's been haunting me. It's that I've been haunting myself. And as you sit here with the silence pressing close, ask yourself if you feel it too. That subtle shift in the air, the sudden awareness that you re-waking up from a dream you didn't know you were in. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.